adventures. It's your OG dice jockey, John, coming to you today. I have been asked by a few different people about a recent post I put on Instagram, a picture of my one of my live groups. There's 12 people in it, and a few people have asked me to do a video about how I manage that many people in a D&D game. So here goes. I've got just 4 things, so hang in with me. I'll try to make it as quick as possible because it's not really as complicated as you would think. It just takes some dedication and I guess the desire to have that many people in your game, which I have a hard time saying no. So if somebody wants to be in the game, I'm probably going to find a way to get them in. So first of all, prepare. Okay, I'm a writer by trade, so that part comes a little easy to me. Maybe it doesn't come easy to everybody, but you don't have to write it like it's a novel. Write a good plot or outline, and then build in options so that you know where the players can go next. Then let them choose. Having them make all the choices really keeps them engaged in the game. And when they're engaged in the game, they don't feel like they're waiting a long time between turns or options or opportunities, however you play the game. Another thing is having things like names, NPC names, places, encounters, stat blocks, having that all at the ready helps immensely to keep things running smoothly. Every time you have to stop, people shut down and reach for their phones. Which you probably see just in everyday life as well. So preparing is immensely helpful with any size group, but especially with a big group. Next, be flexible. This is hugely important. Handling a big group without flexibility is impossible. Not everyone wants to do the same thing all the time. So what I do is I build in sensible splits. I know the rule is don't split the party, but when you have 12 people, you have 3 parties. So split the party, please. So I let them or encourage them by building encounters that encourage splitting to do just that, to get them into smaller groups. And then I run them separately as if they're separate groups, but in a combined way. So I'll go to group 1, we'll do some stuff. I'll go to group 2 when it makes sense. I'll go to group 3 when it makes sense. And then hopefully the story writes them all back together for the big finale. Recently in our live game, they had a situation where they had to get to a king inside of an outpost. So in order to help them accomplish that and to split the party, I gave them things to do or options. They needed to do recon and info gathering to find out what's the protocol. When something bad happens in the town or near the outpost, do they have a safety protocol for the king? Second was, okay, now we know what the protocol is. What kind of distraction can we create to make them go into that protocol? And then the third group was the assault team. So it worked out well. They were successful in their mission, but they made a little mistake that's going to come back to haunt them for sessions to come. Next is tools. Using things like initiative trackers to help keep order to the group helps immensely. The rules themselves are meant to create order in the game. Order in the game, especially a big game, is a precious commodity. You need to keep control of the order. But when I say that, use the rules as a guide. But be prepared to make decisions on the fly that keep the game moving. Never grind the game to a halt over a rule interpretation or looking up a rule. Ask them, what does that spell look like when they cast a certain spell? Especially if you don't know exactly how it works, and that may happen a lot now that 2024 is out, and there's a lot of differences between legacy and expanded rules. Make the decision, be consistent, and keep the game moving. Again, every time you stop the game, they're reaching for their phones and you may not get them back. And then the last and maybe the most important thing, they're all important, don't get me wrong, but the most important thing in your game is your players. So paying attention to them it's not something you can do without as a DM. So in a big group, it's even easier for somebody who's quieter or the wallflower type personality to defer to the big personalities. They'll sit there quietly for the whole session sometimes until you ask them for their actions and initiative. And that does not keep people engaged. Either they're mentally somewhere else or they're on their phone and not paying attention at all. And that's when you start, if you're going to lose players during the game, you're certainly going to lose them between games. They're not going to show up if they're not having fun. And our people show up. We haven't had a canceled session in 2 years. As a DM, you have to be attentive to every player. That means if somebody's being too quiet, draw them out with questions. Draw them out with especially random questions. Have an NPC note, hey, that person's being shady. They're being really quiet. Things like that, that'll draw them back into the game. And whatever you need to use to draw them into the game, do it. And do it often and move around and keep them engaged even when it's not their turn or they're not the focus. The best thing about my group, and despite how big they are, there is no primary character. Nobody thinks their character is the main character of the story. Everybody thinks that the whole team is the main character in the story. And that makes all the difference in the world. So I've been doing this for a long time. I've learned a lot of things. It was not easy when we started this experiment almost 3 years ago. This is the second ongoing campaign we've used with a group this big. And it's all homebrew, so that helps. A lot of it is in my head so that I can spew it out. And to be honest, I don't create my homebrew world with every detail determined. So when they find out something, that becomes lore. When they burn down a building, that becomes lore. When they save someone, that becomes lore. So whatever they do becomes lore. So I don't necessarily think that having a 12-person group is right for everybody, but I don't think there's a DM out there with experience that can't learn to DM a group this big. So my 4 things, your takeaways for this video are: prepare, but be flexible, use tools to keep things organized, and by all means, pay attention to every player. I'll see you guys out there. Let's roll.